Dr. John Dewey, philosopher of pragmatism. Recognizing the ever-changing of the world that we live in. John Dewey was born on October the 20th, 1859 in Burlington, Vermont. He was the third son to Archibald and Lucina Dewey. Lucina Dewey was the daughter of a wealthy farmer. His father, Archibald, was a merchant who left the business to join the Union Army during the Civil War. After the war, his father opened his own tobacco shop and made a comfortable living for the Dewey family. John Dewey attended public school in Burlington, becoming a master's student at a very young age. At only the age of 15, John Dewey enrolled at the University of Vermont. 4 years after enrolling at the University of Vermont, John Dewey graduated second in his class after studying philosophy under H.A.P. Torrey. At the age of 19, Dewey began teaching at a seminary school in Oil City, Pennsylvania, the fall after he graduated. Although Dewey's job was quickly lost 2 years after he began teaching, when his cousin resigned from the principal's job at the seminary school. Dewey then returned home and began teaching at a private school in Vermont. In his free time, he studied philosophy and found himself discussing this with his former teacher, Torrey. He soon realized his passion and took a break from teaching and returned to school at Johns Hopkins University. Upon completing his doctorate's degree, Dewey was hired as an assistant professor at the University of Michigan, where he soon met his wife, Harriet Chipman. In 1886, John and Harriet were married. They quickly began having children. They had a total of 6 children of their own and adopted another. In 1888, Dewey and his family moved to Minnesota, where John Dewey took the job of professor of philosophy, but was unhappy and soon returned to the University of Michigan within a year. Dewey taught at the University of Michigan from 1888 to 1894, when he made the head of philosophy department at the University of Chicago. John Dewey wrote many books over his career. My Pedagogic Creed and The School and Society are 2 books which were published in the late 1890s and the early 1900s that helped shape our idea of today's schools. These books were written on Dewey's views of how schools should be ran and how children should learn. In 1902, Dewey began serving as the University of Chicago's Director, School of Education. But in 1904, he left Chicago and joined the Ivy League, becoming professor of philosophy at Columbia University, while working at the Teachers College on the side. Dewey finally retired from teaching in 1930. Just 3 years before John Dewey had the chance to retire, his wife, Harriet, passed away in 1927. But in 1946, at the age of 87, John Dewey remarried to Roberta Grant. He and Roberta lived off of her inheritance and his book royalties. And in 1946, John Dewey attempted to help labor leaders establish a new political party. But on June the 1st, 1952, the great philosopher John Dewey died of pneumonia in his upscale New York apartment. John Dewey's philosophy was inspired by many, but William James, an American philosopher, had great impact on John Dewey. William James was known as the leader of the psychological movement of pragmatism and the psychological movement of functionalism. In 1880, James was hired to write a book on the field of psychology. It took James 10 years to write one of the earliest primes on the subject, the principles of psychology. However, this book influenced many great people, like John Dewey. James wrote Pragmatism, another book, in 1907, which further explored his philosophical beliefs. William James was known for quotes such as, "To one's life starts immediately. Do it flamboyantly, no exceptions." Another famous quote from James Williams was, "You can alter your life by altering the state of mind." John Dewey's theory of pragmatism consists of fundamental principles. No ultimate values are found. The formation of value is captured during the course of activity. The significance is placed upon experiments in life for practical implications. Significance should be placed on the principle of practical utilities. Real life always makes better progress. Pragmatism and the aims of education. Cooperative development is required for each student. Continuous exposure and experience. And one should always have social order. Pragmatism and the methods of teaching are based off of three principles. The first principle is the principle of progressive learning. The second is the principle of learning by doing. The third is the principle of integration. John Dewey was a very influential individual. He has had multiple schools built under his ideas and theories, and he built a school, the Laboratory School of Chicago, which he built in 1896. Today, the Laboratory School in Chicago is counted as among the most preparatory schools in the United States. John Dewey opened the doors to the Laboratory School of Chicago in January of 1896. His idea of school curriculum was according to age. Children from 4 to 5 would learn to cook, do carpentry work, and needlepoint, basic necessities of life. Students at the age of 6 would begin building, planting wheat, and sell the products at market. Students at the age of 7 would begin studying prehistory and caves that they make. Students at the age of 8 would begin studying navigation, like Marco Polo. Students around the age of 9 would begin learning local history and geography. Students at the age of 10 would begin learning colonial history. Students between the ages of 11 and 12 would get to learn to do experiments. They would do things with political economy, electromagnetism, and students around the age of 13 would begin. John Dewey's Laboratory School in Chicago was a public school built in Gary, Indiana. It was formed in order to allow students to experience a community school at school. American educator William Wright, a former student of John Dewey's, became superintendent of Gary School in 1907. He developed the Gary Plan, which is also known today as the work study or the platoon system. The Gary Plan had organization and curriculum components that provided pragmatic school subjects related to occupation and everyday life. Students were able to split into groups, so while that one group was learning core academics such as English, math, and science, the other group was receiving education on art, physical ed, and industrial arts. With the schools that John Dewey had created, there was many new explorations for the students. The students were allowed to move from one area of the school to another on a regular daily schedule. This gave them the opportunity to use the whole building. Parents were drawn to the curriculum that John Dewey had. It focused on the student. Unlike earlier models of teaching, the learning process was just as important as what was learned. and where curiosity was encouraged. By the turn of the 21st century, numerous school programs and organizational structures had resulted in the Gary Plan movement, wherein wide use of the United States, including multiple period high school schedules. John Dewey did many extraordinary things that shaped the schools of today. Some of the important teaching practices that he stated for today's teachers are things like teachers should make the education child-centered. Education should be active and inactive. The curriculum should be planned at a meaningful level. Educators should make sure that the child understands the curriculum. Education must involve the community in which the child is centered in. Education should also include a child's social world. The past and future do matter in the present. A school should teach a child how to think rather than what to think. And just because it is fun does not mean that it is impressionable to a child. These are all learning tips that John Dewey thinks that future educators should learn.